Salute, my Quickclassics friends. Welcome to this episode of Quickclassics. I'm your host, Dr. Judd Burton, coming to you on this first day of autumn, September the 22nd, 2021. If you like the content, please do click a like, subscribe, and share. And boy, do I have a lesson for you today. Today we're going to talk about the Battle of Adrianople that happened in AD 378 against the Romans and an Eastern Gothic army. Okay, so last week talked about the five reasons that Ed Gibbon gave in the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire for the decline. And you may recall that one of the reasons was this crisis of the third century that involved a economic currency issue, hyperinflation, shortage of soldiers, general transition in the army, amongst the other negative things that he says contributed to the downfall of the empire. Um, why talk about the Battle of Adrianople? Well, because it's part of that decline, and also it may illustrate and throw some light on current events that I'll get to towards the end of the discussion today. But this is an Eastern battle. This is after the Roman Empire was split into two halves, the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. At the time, Gratian is the emperor of the West, and Valens is the emperor in the East. And this is a massive loss for Rome, and we'll get into the details of that. But in order to understand the Battle of Adrianople, we have to understand something about the events leading up to it. So we'll talk a little bit about that today as well. Now, Adrianople was in, if you think about a map of Eastern Europe and the Aegean, this would have been in ancient Thrace, the Roman province of Thrace at the time, which was the portion of Turkey today that's on the European side. So there's a little sliver of the country of Turkey that's on the European continent. That's where this battle took place, and it took place between the Roman army, largely comprised of Eastern forces. There were some Western forces that Gratian sent to help out, and some conscripts at that time, and on the other hand, opposing a Gothic army, the Visigoths, and there were some other Eastern tribes like the Alans that comprised this party. Now, the events that led up to this actually have to do with the displacement of these Eastern tribes by one of Rome's probably more famous nemesis, and that is the Huns. Everybody's familiar with Attila, who was a leader of the Huns. So the Huns move in from the steppes of Asia, the eastern steppes of Asia, and make their way across, and they move into the Roman Empire, and displacing these tribes as they go. People like the Alans and the Sarmatians and the Visigoths and the other Gothic tribes all had to deal with them. So they're displaced, and they petition the Eastern Empire for essentially asylum, protective asylum within the Eastern Empire. And so the Romans say, sure, come on in. They expected them to become farmers and productive members of society, and some of them might even get citizenship. In actuality, there were some promises made. Remember, Rome is still not entirely recovered from the crisis of the third century, and so they're making promises to these peoples that they've been gradually absorbing as they build an empire. Have been building empire for centuries. They're running out of baubles and promises and resources, and so they make some promises that they're not able to keep in terms of resources that don't sort of help these tribes, sort of get going. And so a lot of, some of them start starving, then they start, disease spreads, and it's a big, sort of calamity. And so these Gothic tribes are like, hey, you promised us X, Y, and Z, and we're not getting any help from you, and they got tired of it, and so they started raiding Roman outposts uh, at that point and banding together under the chieftains under an army. And again, this is, the events leading up to Adrianople are really kind of symptomatic of some things that are going on, in dealing with the quote unquote barbarian tribes and even tribes that were absorbed into the Roman Empire. Uh, Again, is that Rome was running out of resources to give away. The reserves were way down, and so they had to increasingly rely on conscripts in the army from these indigenous populations, which sometimes worked out, other times it didn't. And this is a big example of when you've got these people coming into territory, and unfortunately, you know, there Rome didn't have a lot of resource to promise even potential Roman citizens and people who might even help Rome. And so, long story short, these raids begin to ramp up, and the Emperor Valens says, "Okay, that's it. I'm going to take charge of this situation myself, take over control of the armies," and that's what he does. And so, in August of 378, Valens and the Roman army encamp around the location of the battle near Adrianople. And it's during this month that the two forces clash. And it is a debacle for the Romans. Just to put this into perspective, 20,000 of the 30,000 troops that the Romans pitted against this combined Gothic army perished in this battle. The Emperor Valens himself died in this battle. God knows what happened to his body. I mean, it was probably, he was probably dismembered and desecrated and everything else. So it didn't end there with this loss at Adrianople. The Romans had to slink away with their tail between their legs and lick their wounds, far away from Adrianople. And these raids continued. In fact, every Roman armory within those eastern provinces where the Goths were living, were destroyed by this Gothic army. This certainly put a greater pinch with such a loss of manpower. You're talking, as much as, if you're using the classical standards, that's potentially 10 legions, depending on the size of the legion, between 2 and 6,000. That's potentially 10 legions worth of soldiers that are lost. So it's an abysmal, loss for the Romans. It's a real strike to the Eastern Empire and the combined empire in general. And so just from this, this huge influx of these Gothic tribes, they crossed the Danube River into places like the Roman province of Dacia and other places in the east, and are given promises that the Romans really could not keep because they didn't have the resources to do so. But that's what ambitious bureaucrats and politicians do. They promise things that they can't always and often don't deliver on. So this was a huge loss and huge political snafu that led to the further degradation of the Roman Empire. Okay, so why am I bringing up the Battle of Adrianople? Adrianople is a very specific battle in the twilight of the Roman Empire, so to speak. because I see parallels between the influx of these Gothic tribes, uh, the eastern tribes, into the crossing the Danube River into Rome, which was had all kinds of financial, economic issues, political, social, religious, moral issues, currency issues that it had been dealing with, hyperinflation, uh, all of these problems, and couldn't make good on promises that it was making to these people. This is a historical precedent. It's an example of precedent for things that have happened throughout history. I'm afraid that we're potentially seeing it and have been seeing it on our southern border, and so that the Rio Grande River has become the American Danube, because right now there are 15,000 Haitians uh, in Del Rio alone, and then they're gonna be coming down into the lower parts of the Rio Grande Valley, all the way down to Brownsville to come in as well. Now we've known about what what a precarious situation the border has been for years and years, and it's gotten exponentially worse. And that's why in the last episode of the Beyond report, I said America doesn't really have the resources to to give these people the American promise, in much the same way that the Roman Empire did not have the resources to promise the Goths, who were, legitimately escaping, trying to get out of the way of the Huns, did not have the resources to help them out, but gave them the promises and let them come on anyway. And the end result was the Battle of Adrianople, and another serious knock to the Roman Empire, and pushing it along to its eventual demise, as it were. So I see disturbing historical parallels here. Um, and I'd like to know what you guys think about this. I think this may be one of the more important episodes of Quick Classics that I've done. Um, so take this to heart. If you want to, plenty of sources on the Battle of Adrianople, the Eastern Empire, Valens, all the personalities at play here, and what a huge debacle that the Battle of Adrianople was, and what a contributing factor it was to the demise of the Roman Empire. So there are some things to take to heart. That's why the classics in history are so important, is because we're supposed to learn from history. We're supposed to take our cues from both triumphs and tragedies in history. In this case, what I see is a potential tragedy of great magnitude unfolding. So let's hope that it goes the other way. Let's pray that it goes the other way. I'll see you on Quick Classics again. Godspeed.